got him in his drive already. I don't owe nothing. He got all his songs already. How you think he got so hot? Came out with all them tapes. I did that. I put them hooks together. I made incredible music. All he did was rhyme 16s.
Well, you know,
I made incredible. I made the hooks. I made the melodies.
Yeah.
I made the shit, dog. I'm the man. I banged it just enough to get my room so I could ram his shit up, ram it up his ass. Right? My window was there. He tried to grab me. So when he came in the window, I punched him in the face.
Max B.
The wave that Max had generated, in his opinion, he released songs titled I Know Them Dudes Need Me, rapping and lip-sync, making fun of them for it. They really blew it while I was giving them the loot. Jim Jones and Max B used to...
Jim Jones, compare the names. Look, Max Bigavel, Jim Jones. That don't even add up. That's not on my level, man.
To be like family. However, Jim's decision to disregard that connection was Max's transformation from his go-to hitmaker to the living nightmare no one had anticipated. Max B wasn't playing, as evidenced by his reported kidnapping of his girlfriend, destruction of his whip, and transformation of Harlem into a battle zone. Now let's get started. Charlie Wingate grew up in the gritty, fabled uptown struggle of Harlem, New York. The Abraham Lincoln apartment developments are where his story begins. Max B's life was characterized by suffering and perseverance. His grandmother raised him while his mother was incarcerated due to her severe crack addiction. She turned into his pillar of support, but the streets were always near enough to draw him in, even with her help. Charlie Wingate found his voice in the Harlem Boys Choir long before he composed hooks that made the entire East Coast sing. The seeds are located there. Of that distinctive Max B sound, the wavy rhythm, the sing-song flow, and the slow melodic delivery were initially sown. However, the fact could not be obscured by the melody. Max B had already made a mistake by the time he was 18. He was jailed in 1997 on suspicion of robbery and served approximately 8 years in prison. His incarceration did not break him. Rather, it changed him. He had a new name, a sharper edge, and a confidence that only comes from experiencing what you rap about when he was released from prison in 2005. At that point, Max Bigavia moniker he created from the giants. Biggie Smalls, Mavelli, Tupac, and Jay-Z was introduced to the world. Max thought he was the ideal combination, the hustler confidence, the prophetic pain.
My name is Max B, aka Max Bigavel. We know Bigavel stands for Big Jig and Pac, right? But where did the
Big
name...
Jig and Machiavelli, baby.
Yeah.
Big Jig and Machiavelli.
When Max got
Pain. The mesmerizing flow was humming when Max got out. Things were being managed by Diplomats. The streets were secured by Cameron and Jim Jones. Max reconnected with Cam, and he met Jim Jones as a result of that connection. He soon began working with renowned Harlem producer Dame after signing with Jim's label, ByrdGang Grease. There was instant chemistry. The streets went crazy in 2006 when Max B released his debut mixtape, $1 Million Baby. His rawness, his flair, his voice, it resembled lightning in a bottle. Dak Bundles was another emerging star in
bottle.
ByrdGang. Jim Jones was sitting atop a gold mine with Stack and Max B at his side. With hooks and verses that made Jim's records sound bigger than before, Max soon emerged as the secret weapon. Max's charisma improved everything he touched, and songs like Baby Girl became standards. However, Max was never able to flee the streets for very long, regardless of how wonderful the music sounded. Within everything changed in September 2006, through his ex-girlfriend, Gina Conway. Max learned about Alan J. a showy man who runs a mortgage and mail fraud business and is constantly seen carrying large sums of money and expensive whips. Max apparently became envious and hungry after Gina told him everything about him. She claims that Max made it obvious that if they nailed a lick, he would make it worthwhile for everyone to go crazy. The conclusion is obvious. But what transpired next is still up for debate. Prosecutors said Max was the mastermind, even though
Everyone's wild.
Boyfriend Charlie Wingate, aka Max B, a rapper, about the men's money. Then Wingate reaches out to this man, Calvin Leardom.
he wasn't present when it happened. In court, Gina Conway, who was also experimenting with stripping, testified that Max sent her and his stepbrother, Kelvin Sims Leardom, to rob Plowin at a Holiday Inn in New Jersey. It was meant to be an easy strategy. While he was out clubbing, they broke in and took any cash they could. However, the entire process was careless. It is said that Gina and Sims wasted time, missed exits, and lost hours. Plowin had returned to sleeping next to another woman by the time they arrived at the room. Then David Taylor entered. The plan did not include him. In a hurry, Sims executed Taylor by shooting him in the face, turning a robbery into a homicide. Domino to fall was Gina Conway. She sacrificed everything to save herself after being discovered. In a 169-page statement, she accused Max of initiating the plan and
It all began the morning of September 22nd at the Fort Lee Holiday Inn. Police are called there after a man is shot to death. The victim, David Taylor from Florida, was staying in room 227.
Threw him under the bus. She claimed that if she assisted him, he would give her everything: money, loyalty, eternity, and the feds were very forceful in their pursuit of Max. He was taken into custody and charged with criminal murder. Among other life-altering offenses, a hefty $2 million bail was established. Max B was seated in time stopped for him in that chilly prison cell, but not for anyone else. All of a sudden, Jim Jones, the same man who had signed Max and held him back musically, was everywhere. Jim released Ballin', also known as We Fly High. The track was enormous. It become an anthem overnight. Max said he composed it, and it was Jim's biggest hit to date. That, and the majority of Jim's other major successes, he claimed, were good. However, Max was incarcerated and battling for his life and relevance while Jim was cashing checks and conducting interviews. Max's bond was eventually lowered to $90,000. After 10 arduous months, Jim intervened at that point, but not in the manner of a friend. He supposedly used bail as leverage rather than aiding Max out of loyalty. According to reports, Jim would only assist Max in getting out if Max gave up his publication rights and consented to work with him on 6 albums. Locked away and desperate, Max had few choices. He put his signature. Max received momentary freedom with a future, but Jim received all the publishing behind the wavy sound. He could no longer control that. In July 2007, Max B was released from prison, a sharper, colder, and more resentful guy than before, bound by a contract that surrendered away his future publishing to a guy who appeared to gain the most from his demise. He was broke and deceived. Max had waited in a cell and watched Jim Jones, the man he had once considered a brother, gain power, expanded throughout the streets as his name was repeated, like folklore on street DVDs and mix. Additionally, the more people chanted wavy, the more obvious it became that Max B was done staying silent if Jim Jones wasn't going to assist in getting him on. He was prepared to fight. He had every right to feel deceived. Max was losing more than just political ground. He had been defrauded financially. All of Max's publications was held by Jones. This meant Jim was compensated for every hook Max had ever written, every clever line, and every musical ad-lib. Interview.7.31/7.50. It wasn't just business either. The friendship had deteriorated. The allegiance was shattered. Max B was left with a heart frozen by treachery and a mind for vengeance. Thus, he left ByrdGang with a plan. Max was prepared to publicly humiliate Jim Jones if he refused to give him what was right.
Got him in his drive already. I don't owe nothing. He got all his songs already. How you think he got so hot? Came out with all them tapes. I did that. I put them hooks together. I made incredible music. All he did was rhyme 16s.
Well, you know,
I made incredible. I made the hooks. I made the melodies.
Yeah.
I made the shit, dog. I'm the man.
Give him what was rightfully his. Max quickly discovered the ideal buddy in French Montana. French wasn't the #1 rapper he is now at the time. His Cocaine City DVD series, which recorded life in the Bronx and beyond, made him a gritty street character. French was already at odds with Jim Jones due to age. Was accused of spreading false information about him during the shooting event. Therefore, it was more than just a partnership when Max and French connected. Mutual conflict gave rise to a fraternity. They gave their group the name Coke Wave, and it went on to become one of the most recognizable and violent street movements in the history of mixtapes. Max B was well aware that he would not be saved by the industry. His publishing was not his property. He was unsupported by a label. What he did have was a gift for music and a voice that the streets respected. So when he was cornered, he did what hustlers do. He hid underground. He began releasing his songs for free, giving the public access to what the music industry was attempting to suppress. He wasn't merely releasing songs, though. Jim Jones and everyone in his social circle were the targets of his verbal abuse. Max didn't hold back either. Public Domain 3, a mixtape, was the first jab. It was everything stated on the cover. In a cemetery, Max posed alongside tombstones bearing names like Vanille, Joel Santana, and Millie Jim Jones. He likened them to the notorious duet Milli Vanilli, who rose to stardom via lip-syncing. Jim and Joel's were attempting to write off. Max, however, wasn't limited to music. He targeted personal lives, reputations, and the entire framework that Jim Jones was constructing. Max's brutally disrespectful song, She Touched It, in Miami, in which he rapped that Chrissy Lamine, Jim Jones's longtime girlfriend, had been with him in extremely intimate ways while Bigville hit it from the back in her fanny, was one of the most outrageous moments in the feud. The streets devoured a Max, who laughed through the bars, depicting Jones as a man being made fun of by his own close circle. For his part, Jim Jones was completely taken aback. It caught him off guard. He attempted to refute the accusations, minimize Max's significance, and assert that Max was merely another failed rapper who was never taken off the shelf. The streets didn't believe him when he said that Max didn't write his biggest song, We Fly High. The original reference tracks were replete with Max's voice. Jim's true contribution to Diplomats' success began to be questioned. Max acted as though he intended to wage war. It was more than simply conversation. 2. He said that Jim Jones once attempted to ambush him by obstructing his vehicle in a parking lot. Max claimed to have anticipated it, pushed Jim's Bentley aside, and even delivered a few blows before retreating. Max was flaunting his car's dents like trophies, even if it seemed crazy. Interview.10.58-1109. The myth grew after French and others vouched for him. In November 2008, Max and French decided to confront Jim Jones face. They drove far into Manhattan, entered a building where Jim was filming, and made it obvious that the streets were no longer safe for Jones. Later, they claimed that Jim saw the situation developing and called the police, which only made matters worse. Their warring teams even got into a full-fledged altercation at a Brooklyn club around that time, sending chairs flying and prompting the arrival of K9 units. Although it wasn't a movie, the entire experience felt that way. It was simply the depth of the beef. Max B had accomplished more than just disparaging Jim Jones by the time the
I banged it just enough to get my room so I could ram his up, ram it up in. Right? My window was there, he tried to grab me. So when he came in the window, I punched him in the face.
Jones, by the time the smoke cleared, he had made him into a joke. Max turned into a cult hero, the kind of artist who was validated without a label. He managed to become a legend despite being legally bound by contracts that offered him nothing, flooding the streets with music that is still played today. However, Max B was preparing for the biggest fight of his life at the same time as the feud with Jim Jones was spreading like wildfire throughout the streets and mixtape circuits. Max B was getting ready for a criminal trial that would put an end to his wave. Max B entered the Bergen County Courthouse on June 9, 2009, looking like a man who trusted his own narrative. He was accompanied by his staff. The cameras were rolling, and he walked with his trademark assured sway. His legal team was also making grand claims. During cross-examination, they asserted that they had undermined the prosecution's principal witness. They were making reference to Gina Conway, the young lady at the center of this whole illegal scheme. In exchange for a reduced sentence, Gina had turned herself in and testified against Max and his stepbrother, Kelvin Lear. She was charged by Max's attorney of being a mocked woman who made up tales to protect herself. However, you can't use swagger to win battles in courtrooms. Everything Max believed to be true about loyalty, street code, and even redemption fell apart when the jury eventually returned with a verdict. 9 of the 11 charges, including felony murder, armed robbery, conspiracy, and aggravated assault, were found against Max. The prosecution had effectively portrayed him, though he wasn't present to pull the trigger. He was the mastermind behind the entire heist. They claimed that he was the one who organized the theft and persuaded Gina and Kelvin to carry it out so he could take a back seat and retrieve the luggage. Gina Conway was the key to the entire case. She had made an agreement with in exchange for her assistance, her initial murder charges were dropped and she was given a suggested 18-year sentence for armed robbery and manslaughter. The defense put up a fierce fight, claiming that Gina had fabricated much of her story in order to get her term reduced. Strangely, Gina even stated in court that Max had no knowledge of a robbery, asserting that she persuaded her partner, Kelvin, to carry out the plot by using Max B's name. The jury rejected the defense's claim that Gina only implicated Max later out of self-interest and anguish, attempting to portray him as the puppet master in return for mercy. On September 3, 2009, Max B received a sentence of 75 years in jail. Interview.14.19, 14.30. Qualified for parole in 2042. Overnight, Max changed from being a street-buzzing icon to a convict. Jim Jones appeared to be having fun when the streets were in mourning. Jones believed he had achieved the ultimate checkmate from a business perspective. Max was in prison. Jones still held the publishing rights to all of Max's music, and his voice was no longer a threat. Jim's pocket was still filled with all of Max's hooks, melodies, and scents. Jones even made fun of Max in public whenever he had the chance. He made a call. They called him ridiculous names, wrote him off as unimportant, and continued to tell the story that Max was washed before he ever started. During interviews, Jones gave the impression that he had moved on, and that Max was just outdated stock that he had used but would never remove from the shelf again. However, it wasn't as sealed as Jones thought. Max B wasn't finished, even from behind bars. He was loved too much by the streets. His name was too powerful. Max maintained his presence.
Right around that time, Max B gets found guilty on 9 of 11 counts, including felony murder. And he gets sentenced to, was it 75 years?
Yeah, 75.
His presence by communicating with independent labels and French Montana DJs. Could. Then a significant court ruling in May 2010 completely changed the balance of power. According to a judge, Jim Jones was no longer in charge of Max B's musical career. The judge determined that Max had complied with the conditions of the 2 agreements he had made with Jones back in 2005 and
Originally, you were sentenced to 75 years. But then last July, you said he got reduced to 20 years and then to 12 years.
2007. To put it simply, Max was free. At least he was free of the paper chains that bound his artwork to the pockets of another man. That contract was expired, but Max was still incarcerated. At last, he could release his eagerly anticipated 2011's Vigilante Season album. The streets made it obvious to anyone who was still skeptical of Max's effect. For a whole generation of rappers, his wavy flow, the catchy gangster bop he had helped create, became the secret. The radio could not be turned on without detecting hints of Max in someone's harmonies, cadence, or discussion of waves, vibrations, or being free. Max B. Then the incredible turn of events occurred. After 7 years of service, Max's new lawyers presented a legal bombshell in 2016. They contended that Max's initial attorney was inept. Rather than placing, the attorney was apparently eyeing a large salary, expecting to ride Max's rap fame to riches if he won the case, while putting up the greatest criminal defense possible. Post-conviction relief, a strategic legal argument exceptional, was successful. Max's initial 75-year sentence was overturned by the judge. As part of a plea agreement, Max ultimately entered a guilty plea to aggravated manslaughter. His sentence was reduced by 55 years as a result of the plea agreement, first to 20 years and subsequently to 12 years. Additionally, Max's release date was approaching and he had already served a number of years, so he wasn't ultimately perishing in prison. November 9, 2025 was designated as his official release date. Interview.17.26/17.3 for Max B was more than just a rapper by that point. He was a legend, the type of artist whose impact was evident everywhere, from underground freestyles to the star-studded albums of Kanye West. When Kanye attempted to call his 2016 album Waves, he was forced to, after the Wave community went after Max's throat, openly acknowledge him. Max's voice was included in a song by Kanye. He was openly cited as an inspiration by Drake and Wiz Khalifa. Jim Jones, too. In a rare moment of candor, he acknowledged that if Max B hadn't been imprisoned, he might have been greater than Drake. As of 2025, nevertheless, a peculiar query lurks over the entire story. Are Jim and Max still at odds, or is it finally over, finished? Speaking from prison, Max made it obvious that he was in a different place. He was claimed to be a new guy, a married, a father of 4, and that the old anger had vanished in favor of perspective. He even alluded to the prospect of eventual. It didn't sit well with Jim Jones. Even so, he and French Montana Jim made it apparent that Max was still in a different scenario, even though they had re-established their connection and even collaborated on music in 2023. He claimed he didn't want to hurt Max, but he also didn't want to feel at ease.